learning new information is invaluable. And, you know, maybe a PhD isn't the only way to develop that skill, but it sure is a really good one. And it certainly has come in handy quite a bit. I think another, just from a, maybe from a less kind of academic perspective, the PhD, one of my memories was really needing to believe in myself, because don't know how far all of you are in your training, but at a certain point, things aren't gonna go well, and you really have to have confidence that you'll make it through. And a lot of times I have that, there's a similar sentiment in entrepreneurship where a lot of things can go wrong. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. I mean, people, lots of things have changed, and you have to have the confidence that you'll be able to make it through. And I thought, you know, the PhD experience certainly strengthened that in me.
Thank you for that. And to the future Dr. Ramirez Hernandez, you're our panelist who has participated in I-Corps. Would love to hear more about that experience.
So I did I-Corps last year. I'm usually a very shy person, and I really struggle with public speaking. So being the entrepreneurial lead in the I-Corps program really forced me to get out of my comfort zone and try to explain my project to people that were not necessarily in my field. So when you're in an I-Corps presentation, you have all the teams in your cohort. So for example, I was with someone in transportation, so I had to make my project relatable to them. And so it really forced me to really think about how to frame my customer, my user. And so I think it's been really helpful, at least for me, to identify what my project has applications in rather than just being more fundamental. So I think I-Corps definitely gave it a boost.
Thank you for that perspective. We're going to open up the floor for questions. Feel free to unmute yourselves and also to place your questions in the chat. I have tons of questions, but this is about you all. So
I can go first.
Perfect.
So Hedrick, am I saying that right? Hello.
Hedrick?
Hedrick, yeah.
Hedrick, Dr. Hedrick, go ahead.
Just call me James.
Okay. So you had mentioned that, well, I actually know Chad Mirkin. He does very fundamental work, and I'm wondering, at least in the, as far as translating research, especially fundamental research into a business side, how would you say the process is to take pieces of your PhD project and find a marketable aspect of that?
Yeah, it's not an easy process, especially the more fundamental you go. It comes down to starting to take a hard look at where the technology is today and how long it's going to take it to get to the commercial end. And then with that time period, once you really understand that, it's finding a way and to really understand your market and finding programs to help you learn that. So that's where I think I-Corp is really good. For me personally, I didn't do that route. I went down and started working with Kellogg, which is Northwestern's business school, and taking a lot of classes there and making it where we were able to go and be the case study. And that really allowed us to prove out the market and see different things where we were cold calling customers and really learning from customers what it needed to be an application that they actually worked for them and a real solution. I think that's one of the key things, is that when you're getting to that point, can you then get it in front of someone that you think would want to use it, and find out, do they actually want to use it?
Who else has a question? Thumbs up from Cynthia.
I have a quick question. Oh, sorry. I have a quick question. I was wondering, and this is for all panelists, but I was kind of wondering what the process looks like for not only identifying customers, but also talking to them. So we've talked a little bit about that in that presentation, where you're not really trying to necessarily sell them on something as much as you're trying to figure out whether or not your idea fits in that need. And so I was wondering how you like navigate that and like what that process looks like for each one of you.
I can start. So for example, for my potential product, one of our target customers would have been emergency responders. And so I vividly remember one instance where I talked to a firefighter, and following the train of thought of not trying to sell them the products, I basically asked him, well, suppose someone gets burned. What kind of protocols do you follow? And how does that make you feel? How does that make the other person feel? If, for example, you could have a wish list of things that would make your life easier, like how can you share them with me? And so an interview that I thought was going to take me 15 minutes turned into an hour and a half long, just because this person was like basically going on about all the flaws on the current protocol, or how tough it was for him, both physically and mentally. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's one way, like just let the person talk and sit back and hear them out. And then you can basically like sort of push it, but not so much. You want to take a step back and let them do the talking. For our iCorps cohort, they recommended a book called Talking to Humans. So if you could get your hands on it, that would be really helpful.
I can go next. I think for my company and our product, the most important aspect of the customer has been validating our assumptions, because I think one of the most dangerous things you can do is to make the wrong assumption as a business. So you always want to be de-risking the decisions that you're making. And for us, the customers span from patients, but then also include the physicians that are actually ordering the test, and so the general practitioner physician, as well as radiologists who are interpreting the imaging data that gets generated in conjunction with our test. And there's lots of examples where I was thinking one thing, members from our team were thinking one thing, oh, this is really important, this is going to be really helpful, and we'll get the feedback, and it's nope, it's not, right? And not that we were completely off target, but you have to get the product right? And you want to be addressing the most important needs. So I can think of just several kind of examples where I'm glad I or someone from my team asked the question. We took that feedback, and then we're able to act on that feedback, and hopefully it leads to a successful outcome.
And I'll say for us, it started, we've gone through a lot of iterations, that we have a core technology that we know has applications, and our business model has changed 5 times as we started going, and we're still a little ways from actually getting product to market. The first thing we did was doing cold calling, where it was through one of my classes. We called 150 organizations that we had narrowed down based off who we thought was the right customer. So we did make an initial assumption of, okay, for us, we originally thought it's manufacturers in the Midwest we want to start with. We called a group of them. I would say one of the keys that really allowed us to do it really well was and this will work for you, is that you're a student. You say, I'm a student, I'm doing a research project on this subject and this particular application that there's been a breakthrough in the lab, and we wanted to see if there's a use for it for you guys. And then have some specific questions around it, and also how they would use it, how, you know, give them like 1 or 2 different business models that would be employed with it, and see how it goes. And that really shaped it for us. And then it shaped further when we actually got to the point where we can get something in people's hands. And then they really could start working with them and trying the parts out. So for us as a 3D printing company, we couldn't send printers out, but we could make parts for them and get their feedback on those parts. And then what's also useful for you is when you do get to that stage where you get stuff in their hands, it's also a good time to see if they're actually willing to pay. So to do that discovery, it doesn't have to be a huge fee, but have them start after the initial cold calls and you're getting to the points where they interact, get them to put up some sort of money to show that, you know, there is a real demand, that they're willing just to pay to try this out. Especially if it's a B2B application, which most PhD research, I feel like, goes into.
Thank you for that. So clearly you're hearing some themes here, especially around customer discovery. Does anyone else have any questions?
Nehemiah had a question.
I had a question from Ramirez, but I don't know. I think it doesn't look like she's on right now. Maybe something happened. Because it was specific to I-Corps. I was just wondering how she had managed her time and kind of the next steps for her after doing I-Corps, since she's still going through her grad program. But another general question that I have just for the other panelists is team dynamics, working with people that you had done research with previously, potential PIs or other research members, like how you manage those team dynamics. What are some maybe things to watch out for, or things just to be mindful of?
Yeah, I feel like team dynamics is one of the most critical things, especially when you're starting out, and with founders and people coming in that initial stage, you're going to be a team with them all the way through. I feel like it's very similar to how you think about doing your PhD for that initial team. Is when you're working with someone, sometimes people are just assigned, but usually you have some leeway to who you're working with as you start going down that project. And people that you want to spend all the time doing your PhD hours, it's the same sort of thing. Find people you can depend on, that you can do long hours with. And then really make clear guidelines of who's taking what part. If you're having a company, someone has to be the one that answers at the end of the day to everything. When you're in your PhD, that's your advisor. When you start the company, that's meant to be shifting over to whoever's the CEO. It should not be your advisor. Your advisor is a professor and can be on the board and can be an advisor, but there needs to be some sort of shift in making sure that that's clearly laid out from the start is going to be really helpful and stop issues that could come later on. And same thing with other grad students. If you're taking the business side or you're taking the tech side and splitting it up that way as a group, really just clearly get those things defined at the start, and then just make sure you're bringing on good people. There's nothing worse than bringing on people that aren't a good fit with both the culture, but also the speed of a startup.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it's the people aspect and how they work together. I think it's the most important part of a company. You can have a fantastic plan, but with the wrong people, you won't execute on it. You could have great people and still make a so-so plan work. So you need the best people. I think a couple of points. I guess the first is, and I think James said this as well, you have to be clear with the expectations. People have to know what they're responsible for and what they're not responsible for. You want to set that up front. That will save you so many headaches down the road. I can't overemphasize that. The other point is it takes an extraordinarily, I mean, for me, and I think a lot of other companies, and you know, there's always exceptions, it takes a really long time to find the right people. And I was not prepared for that timeline when I shifted from grad school to entrepreneurship, I was thinking, okay, well, software developer, lab manager, just, you know, I didn't have any expectations, but I didn't expect it to take 9 months. And that was not that far outside of the norm in my particular industry. So the team has to be structured right. I think the most important thing there is clear expectations, and I guess people need to be able to communicate well, but then don't lose sight of the fact that it takes a really long time to build that team. And that's actually something you can start doing now, right? You may not even have a company in mind, but you can start building your team, right? These are the potential colleagues and potential mentors that you could begin searching for now, because it's going to take you time, and you already have some, but you want to grow that network. And it's one of the most critical factors for success, I think, in entrepreneurship. If it's not the most, it's one of the most, but it could possibly be the most critical factor.
That's a great point, Isaac. I was talking to a GEM alumna the other day who built out her entire technology team with GEM fellows. So this is family. These are people who are fully capable and willing to help each other. So keep that in mind as well as you think about these partnerships and who you put on your teams. Did we lose Mariceli again? I think we
No,
might.
she's here.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
And I did let her know that Nehemiah had a question for her.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, do you ask her here or?
Nehemiah, go ahead.
Yep. So, Maricel, the question I had for you was how you managed your time while you were going through I-Corps. And now that you've completed I-Corps, like what are things like in the lab? Like, are you expected to apply what you learned from I-Corps to your research, or do you and your advisor talk about I-Corps, or are you just not doing research as usual?
So it was a wild ride, balancing, like, since I did it in my first year, I was taking classes, doing research, and doing I-Corps. But luckily, my co-entrepreneurial lead, she was a business major, and so we sat down one day and said, hey, we're going to, for example, do interviews from 5 to 10 maybe, and then just really focus on schoolwork before that. In terms of lab, so I-Corps helped me basically take the would-be customer feedback and translate it to a design parameter, if that makes sense. And so I would say based on that feedback, some of my experiments were determined. And so it's a back and forth between myself and my PI. There are some concerns from him, however, that it'll take some time, but we're working those kinks out. It's a matter of basically pitching the program to the professor and saying, hey, I think this will help me in XYZ way for my particular goals and my project. So yeah, it's you give and you take, I guess. So it's communication mostly. So yeah.
And when it comes to pitching your project, that's part of the reason why GEMi4 is here. For you to be able to come ask questions and really formulate all of those ideas so that you can move on to that next step once you move beyond the regional I-Corps. Any other questions?
I had a quick question regarding like I view like I-4 and I-Corps programs as like you as a hatchling sitting in a nest, and you have something supporting you, whether it's your grad program or some sort of relationship, but eventually you do have to, if you're going to pursue this entrepreneurial path, you have to fly. And I guess that to like the panelists too that are already flying and one is thinking about it, I guess like what's going to be your, and when you did decide to take off, like what made you fully commit? Because I think eventually the venture is going to require your 100% of your attention, and like, so you won't be able to do another position or have active research elsewhere if you're kind of supporting the venture. So like decision making when it was ready to fly, and how you got there and stuff like that. Could you expand upon that maturation process from something that's supporting you to versus what you were doing before?
Just jumping into the flying, that's one of the big things, is that eventually you do have to make that jump. For us as a company, the jump came when we took in the first amount of money. And that was really the time where it gave us enough to get space off campus, get some other people in, and go full time. I think one of the great things about having the PhD for like a tech-based company, though, is that for me, I still was able to do some transitioning time, but the end of my PhD was all applied research that went into the company. And it's one of the things that adds in great about PhDs that are done at your university, is that you can still use all that IP in the company when you license it out. So anything you discover at the university has to be filed through the university. So since that's happening already, if you already filed the first patent, you can actually just set up your license to be the first patent, the second, the third, all the patents while you're still doing that PhD student and into the company from the get-go. I think that really gave the ability for me to jump out and fly with still having some sort of security blanket in a way for jumping in. And then, because for me, it was a big thing that I wanted to make sure I finished my PhD first before I was technically full-time in the company.
Yeah, I think I had a reasonably similar, let's say, transition period where before fully immersing myself, there was a period of time where I was still a student and still earning a salary, but essentially working full-time at the company. I just want to emphasize the point that each company is different, and to sometimes a greater or lesser degree, you don't have to be fully immersed. You don't fully have to go all in from day one. A lot of times, things just take time, and you don't necessarily need to quote unquote quit your day job. Ultimately, it's very likely that that's going to have to happen, but just really think through kind of when must I dedicate all of my resources. And then I guess the other point is what de-risks opportunities is money. And I mean, it's an obvious point, but to the extent that there's funding that you can apply for, one of the so our company utilized the SBIR program from the NIH, Small Business Innovation and Research, and they have various size awards. I think it's been a while since I looked at the website, but I think anywhere between, let's say, 500,000 up to $2.5 million for a fast track phase 1 and phase 2. They might be challenging to obtain. They can be competitive, but at the same time, you can write a grant in your spare time, right? I mean, it's just so your specific circumstance is going to really inform kind of what makes sense, and when you personally pull the trigger. But just it's certainly something to really think through carefully. When do you actually have to do that full immersion, and what are the things that you can do, in particular identify funding sources to kind of make that decision point easier?
So I do want to reference one thing that Grant said earlier, and that was around applying to I-Corps and going through that particular program makes you much more competitive for those SBIR grants. So as you think about how to pitch this to your advisor, and really what are the advantages, make sure you always keep that at the forefront of your mind as well. Any other questions?
And I'll just one other point to add on, the needs for your startup could also be very different. So, I mean, there's several other, I'm probably not sharing any new information, but there's also several other grants, programs that you want to look at that offer less amounts of money that could be perfect for kind of that transition period. So I don't want to give people the wrong impression that, I mean, there's a variety of funding mechanisms out there that after you kind of think through carefully what your particular needs are, you might find very useful.
Thank you. Faye Hewitt, that's how you say it, right? I was close.
Yeah. Yeah. My question is like, what are some of like the challenges you faced along the way, and maybe the mistakes you made that we could learn from? And also, if you could talk about like the qualities that you have that allowed you to be successful in this path.
So, go for it, Marceli.
Okay, so one of the challenges I've had is team members quitting. So I think going forward, I have to be a little bit more picky and clear of what I want my team members to be. And I guess a quality that helped me here is just perseverance or being stubborn. Like so we get a lot of rejection, right, as a student. So if you apply for a fellowship or a grant, rejection is part of it, but it really shouldn't be something that deters you when pursuing those opportunities if you really believe in your technology and you see there is a gap in the field that you can help fill. So yeah.
So I would say perseverance is going, go for it, Isaac.
No, please. No, please.
Perseverance is going to be your biggest friend when it comes to it. The challenges you're going to face are going to be the startups are kind of like your PhD. There's extreme highs and extreme lows, and they keep coming one after another, and kind of have to be able to take the punches and keep going with it and figure out how to keep going. Another big challenge you're going to have is kind of what Isaac was talking about with funding. Finding funding is going to be half your time. Once you fully dive in and you're no longer in the grad student world, it's going to be how do you keep the money rolling in until you have profitability. And so figuring out what's the passive resistance for you. So that is one regret I didn't do is I didn't do startup competitions. I should have done that. And my advisor, we went back and forth on it. We said no, and a couple months later when it was too late, we wish we did that. You should look at the SBIR. If you haven't looked at those calls, do them on a quarterly basis from all the different departments from DOD to NSF. You should also be looking, depending on what your needs are, but if you need lab and research space, this is something my friends and startups have done that is really good, is stuff like Cyclotron Road out in the Bay Area. That's with Lawrence Liver National Labs. Argonne National Lab has one too, where it's a 2-year program that they pay for a couple postdoc level salaries, as well as give you lab space to really go try it out. So it's you're full-time committed to it, and they give you enough money to have a small team to prove out the tech while starting to get the business up and running. Programs like that, that'll be the transition after your grad student days, will be really helpful as well. But you just got to figure out where the funding is going to come and what's going to be that easiest path to get money. So I wouldn't say one's better than the other. It's just picking wherever you can get money, because the more money you have, the better you're going to be able to go with this. The bigger team, the better resources, all of that starts coming together.
Yep, yep.
I'd like to add, sorry.
Oh, no, yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to add on the funding side, try as best as you can for it to be non-dilutive before you actually take a leap with the company. That's all.
Marcelli, can you expand upon what that means, just in case there's some fellows who don't know that terminology?
Okay, so the way I understand it is non-dilutive basically works more as a grant. So for example, I-Corps would give you a little bit of non-dilutive funding. So that means you don't lose any stake in your company. So if you've seen Shark Tank before, most of the teams offer X percent of their company in exchange for, I don't know, $500,000. And so that would be dilutive funding. That's it.
Thank you.
I will actually say the opposite point of view of it's good to do that, and like free money, non-dilutive money is great, but don't be, I know a lot of people that have been afraid to take dilutive money, and it's hurt them in the long run. Because one of the things that if you do dilutive money right, it's usually with a venture group or with private investors that have done startups before. And it might be the way that you find that right mentor. For me, that's one of the things is that our first round of money was dilutive, but I have people that I get a call up now. One guy, one of our funders, he used to be the chief strategic officer at Microsoft. And if he wasn't in the company, he wouldn't be someone that I can call up and get advice from. And it's been a world difference for us because of that. So don't be afraid. Definitely take the free non-dilutive money, but don't be afraid to get the dilutive, especially if it comes with help.
Yep. Money is helpful, right? And you need it. So ultimately, you can, our strategy was to try to get both types. There's advantages and disadvantages of both. But it's an important part of running a business. So, if you're giving up equity in exchange for funds, that's not, it's certainly not the end of the world. That's how the vast majority of businesses get started, but it is really, really helpful. It certainly can be when it's non-dilutive. The one comment I wanted to make about the kind of mistakes along the way, they're countless. I think, and just, I guess on one level, that's okay, right? I mean, everyone's going to make mistakes. I mean, there's so much to do and so little time. I think one of the things I didn't appreciate nearly as much in grad school that manifested itself repeatedly was I didn't have, let's say, the best appreciation for understanding all the skills I didn't have. I knew a lot about cancer genetics, and I was eager, and still am, an eager learner. But it's a big jump to go from running a research project to running a company. How do you hire and how do you fire people? How do you raise money? Ultimately, you're not going to be able to master everything. So I think one of the most important skills, actually, and I think this, at least for me, was a little counterintuitive when, like in my PhD, I looked inward to solve problems, right? I mean, it can be, there's certainly discussion with your colleagues, there's lab meetings, but it's inherently many times an individual level problem solving, and it's much more commonly the case where it's group problem solving in entrepreneurship. So don't be afraid to ask for help. That's how I think the best companies are formed, is people realizing that no one can do everything, and you need to be able to go to people to help you when you need it. And that's not a sign of weakness, that's a sign of strength. And I think that now I feel like I have a much better appreciation for the importance for asking help. Maybe some of you already learned that lesson, but I guess just there's an explosion of new things that you have to, problems you have to solve, and situations that you have to manage. So I think it's likely would be a challenge to a lot of people. So keep that in mind. And going back to a point I made earlier, it's never too early to start building your network, right? I mean, even if you know, you don't work at the same company as someone, you could still ask them questions, right? I mean, it's an incredibly important feature, I think, of people that are successful, particularly in entrepreneurship, is to have people that they can go to ask for help. And many of the times, I can't really think of an example, or if it's happened, it's really rare. I mean, people in this space are just usually so willing to help, right? So not only is it helpful to you to get help, I mean, people are willing to offer help. So that to me was one of the bigger changes in my mindset from grad school to entrepreneurship.
I did want to very quickly recognize Brittany Hicks has a question. How did you go about pitching your participation in the program to your research advisor / PI? And I'm assuming that that's to Marcelli.
So before meeting my advisor, so in the time frame from undergrad to starting grad school, I just sat down with him and said, hey, I have this idea, and I had done the VentureWell program beforehand, so I went with both the idea and a little bit of the extra grant money that I had from VentureWell. But I also, what I've been doing is saying, hey, like for example, I-Corps opens the door to SBIR or maybe an STTR, and then that'll help the professor like essentially add it to their CV, and so that also gives them more, I guess, standing, and so it'll be a little bit more different than the conventional grants, and so I think they see value in that. It keeps them competitive, and there might be opportunities to get the research out there instead of it just staying in the lab. But it's a process.
And that's very true. It is a process, but again, this is why we are here as GEMi4, to help you throughout this process, to make sure you have competitive applications to the programs, and to make sure that you have the information in order to be successful as well. And so we are closing in on the end of the session. We appreciate you all for being here. To all of the panelists, thank you for all of your sage advice, from the customer discovery piece to making sure that you're partnering with the right people. And then also just, you know, reflecting upon your PhD journey and how that has really transformed your entrepreneurial experience. So we thank you for that. And to our 2 GEM fellows, this is a part of your family, your GEMpreneurs. And make sure you reach out to these panelists if you're interested in talking to them, because they're now an extension of your network. So with that being said, I will transfer it over to Dr. Q.
What can I say? Thank you all for sticking with us today, and hopefully you have learned a lot. Hopefully you have gained some things that you'll be able to kind of put in your toolkits of the next journey for entrepreneurship. Hopefully some of you came into today's session thinking that, no, entrepreneurship is not for me, or I'm not even thinking about being an entrepreneur. At 3:51 on Tuesday, June 30th, as you're getting ready to start the second half of the year, hopefully now you're saying, well, you know what, I am a bit more entrepreneurial. So if you go back to the definitions of the entrepreneur, entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurial. The panel's amazing. Thank you, panel, for sharing your insight. And I think it's always useful and helpful when you have people who are able to connect to where you are and understand what it is that you've been doing. You guys are right here on the cusp of where these fellows are. So you're not like 15, 20 years removed. You're right there. And that's always helpful in order to motivate and inspire this generation of saying, hey, you know what, I can do this too. So thank you, Mariceli, for sharing your experiences directly on the I-Corps and the program that you went through, and much success to you on your future I-Corps endeavors. Isaac and James, as I said in the breakout room, thank you for sharing your experiences and continued success for your companies. For our fellows and Gempreneurs who are here, I'm not going to take up too much more of your time because there's not much else to say. Dr. Warner has really laid out the pathway of I-4, our initiative, to get you to this I-Corps program, or this initiative and program to help you start thinking about where you go next in terms of your research. And so if you have any questions, send an email to GEMi4 at GEMi4@gemfellowship.org, and we can start setting you up with office hours. Or if you can't remember that, you can always reach out to Latane or Talmesha or myself, and we will get you connected, give you the access that you're looking for. Matt, I know you had a lot of questions on the life sciences aspect, so please feel free to reach out to us and we can connect you with some more people who are in the life sciences space. Isaac, I'm sure, would be more than happy to do some follow-up questions as available. And we have plenty of GEM fellows. You remember, GEM is a family, so we have plenty of family members who can help and assist you in those areas. To everyone else, please remember to take the survey, give us your feedback, let us know. We know it's been a long day. It really has been an enjoyable day to spend it with you. And with that, I will say have a great rest of the week and rest of the summer. Be safe, stay healthy.
Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Look forward to hearing from you.